I wasn't even halfway through the gate of my own ranch when I saw her storming toward me, arms flailing, phone in hand, screaming into 911. He's trespassing. He's breaking into that house. He looks suspicious. I raised an eyebrow, looked down at my polished boots, my government-issued ID on my belt, and the keys I literally just used to unlock the front gate. I hadn't been home in a month. Court cases, travel, and federal oversight hearings had kept me away. But this was how I was welcomed back. Here's the kicker. Karen didn't just call the cops on the wrong guy. She called them on the federal judge who had been quietly building a case to shut down her entire HOA for 2 years. And today was the day she set everything in motion by dialing 911. 3 years ago, I bought this stretch of land in the foothills, 40 acres, a ranch house, peace. I wanted a place to get away from the chaos of Washington and the constant grind of my legal circuit. It was mine, purchased in full, properly deeded, zoned for agricultural and private use. And most importantly, it wasn't part of any HOA. Or so I thought. 6 months after I moved in, I started receiving strange letters. Welcome to Hidden Ridge Estates HOA. As a member, your monthly dues of $1,100 are due by the 1SD. Excuse me? I called the number on the letter. A woman named Linda answered, syrupy sweet at first. Oh, yes, we're retroactively extending HOA jurisdiction to surrounding parcels. It's part of our new land continuity program. You benefit from our security, signage, and aesthetic oversight. My reply was simple. I'm not part of your HOA. Never signed anything. I'm a constitutional law expert. You might want to check your definitions. Click. I thought that would be the end of it. It was just the beginning. Enter Karen, the self-declared president of the HOA, though records later showed she was never legally elected. She started small, nasty letters, complaints about unauthorized animals, aka my horses, and demands that I paint my barn neutral beige to match the so-called community standard. I ignored her, politely at first. Then one day, I came home to see an orange violation sticker slapped on my front door. Improper structure facing community path. The path? That was my driveway. The final straw came when she blocked my mailbox, literally parked her SUV in front of it for a week straight. The post office even stopped delivering. I had no choice. I filed a formal complaint to the county and then, slowly, began compiling everything because I knew exactly where this was going. And as a federal judge, I had tools most folks don't. I requested public records on the HOA. Turns out, they had no legal charter. The founding documentation had expired years ago, and no one had bothered to renew it. Their funds were murky, dues were collected, but there were no expense reports, no audits, and several donations made to a private account in Karen's name. So I flagged it to the Attorney General's office. That set off a quiet but deep investigation involving fraud, misuse of power, and property extortion. I didn't put my name on anything. I didn't want to taint the process. I just watched and waited. All I had to do was give Karen a little more rope. And boy, did she give it to me. Which brings us back to the day I returned from D.C. I had just finished presiding over a high-profile civil liberties case. Mentally exhausted, I just wanted a few days of quiet on the ranch. But Karen had other plans. As I pulled into my property, she came running. I didn't even get the chance to step out before she blocked my truck and started yelling. I already called the cops. You're not allowed here. This land is under HOA jurisdiction and you've been fined. She held up a crumpled violation notice like it was the Constitution. I calmly stepped out, showed her my property deed and my federal ID. I don't care who you are, she shrieked. You think that badge means you can break the law? She didn't recognize my name. But the 2 deputies who arrived sure did. One of them froze. Judge Nolan? I nodded. Good afternoon, Deputy Myers. Good to see you again. Karen's face went ghost white. I turned to her and said, Karen, I'd advise you to stop talking. This is being documented. She started sputtering. He's lying. He forged that badge. That's not even real. He's impersonating someone. Myers calmly said, Ma'am, that's a sitting federal judge, and this is his land. You might want to step away. I want him arrested, she screamed. Arrested? He's broken our rules. Then the second squad car pulled up, but it wasn't a local cop. It was a federal marshal, the very one assigned to my office when I traveled. He stepped out, walked straight up to me, nodded, then turned to Karen and said, Ma'am, you're being served. Her face twisted in confusion. Then she read the envelope. Subpoena, federal court, investigation into fraudulent HOA activity. Karen tried everything. Lawyers delaying tactics, even attempting to frame neighbors as co-conspirators. But the evidence spoke for itself. Fake fines, forged signatures, retaliation against non-members, illegally collected funds. Over the next 3 months, the entire HOA structure crumbled in court. Dozens of homeowners who had been afraid to speak up finally came forward. The court dissolved the HOA completely. Karen? She was sentenced to 5 years probation, barred from participating in any housing authority for life, and ordered to repay over $140,000 in misused funds. The best part? My ranch was finally legally and permanently declared independent of any future HOA or association. The court decision even carried my own signature. Now I live in peace. No more letters. No more stickers. No more screaming across fences. Just wide fields, open sky, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice was served. I don't tell this story to brag. I tell it because too many people get bullied by HOA boards who think they're untouchable. But no one is above the law, not even Karen. 3 days after receiving her subpoena, Karen wasn't hiding in shame, she was doubling down. I was feeding the horses when I noticed a news van at the end of my gravel road. A local reporter with too much gel in his hair and a microphone in hand came marching up like he was about to break the Watergate scandal. Sir, is it true you're using your position to harass a community volunteer and illegally take over Hidden Ridge estates? I blinked at him. You mean Karen? She says you falsified documents to take her land and threaten her HOA, he said, puffing up like a rooster. I handed him a copy of the federal injunction with the official seal and watched his face drop. That's real? Very real. And if your crew doesn't leave private property in the next 60 seconds, you'll be trespassing. Karen stood at the gate, screaming at the cameraman to keep rolling. He's lying. He's making it all up. The best part? The reporter included none of it in the final broadcast. Turns out his boss had a cabin here too, and he had been bullied by the HOA for years. The story that aired? Local HOA faces federal scrutiny after fraud allegations. Karen didn't smile much after that. While the court case was still brewing, one of the former HOA board members, an elderly man named Gerald, reached out to me. I think you should see something, he whispered on the phone. We met behind the local diner, and he handed me a key and a note that read, Unit 7B Storage Max off Highway 12. What I found there blew the case wide open. Boxes and boxes of old documents hidden off the HOA's books. Canceled checks, handwritten fine ledgers, even audio recordings of board meetings where they openly discussed targeting outsiders like me. But the worst? A ledger with dozens of entries labeled Community Discretionary Fund, every one routed to Karen's personal Venmo account. Even worse, one name on the ledger was a local widow who'd been threatened with foreclosure for non-payment. I brought the whole file to the federal marshals. That's when the case upgraded from civil to criminal. And Karen had no idea the clock was ticking. With Karen under investigation, you'd think the HOA would cool down. Wrong. A group of her loyalists, mostly retirees who believed every word she said, called an emergency meeting and tried to vote in a new HOA president. Problem was, the HOA was legally frozen under federal injunction. No new officers, no meetings, no activity of any kind. I showed up at the clubhouse that night just to watch the chaos unfold. There were at least 20 people crowded in, some yelling, some waving around ballots. When I stepped inside, the room went quiet. Karen's friend Debbie stood up and said, "You're not welcome here." I held up a printed copy of the federal court order and calmly replied, "Neither is this meeting." Two marshals stepped in behind me a second later. Papers were dropped. People scattered. Someone even knocked over the punch bowl. It wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was evidence tampering. And the FBI was officially watching now. A week before the court date, I got a certified letter. It was from Karen. In it, she begged for mercy, claimed she didn't understand how HOAs worked, said she'd been misled by others on the board, and pleaded for the charges to be dropped. She even included a handwritten apology and a request to settle privately. I showed the letter to my legal counsel. He laughed. "She's not sorry. She's scared." But here's what Karen didn't know. I had already recused myself from the judicial panel months ago. I wasn't going to preside over the case. I had someone tougher in my place, a judge known for making examples out of community corruption cases. So I wrote Karen back one simple note, apology noted. Justice is not negotiable. And I submitted both letters to the court. They became part of the public record. Karen had officially talked herself into deeper trouble. One of the final blows came from a place no one expected, a retired veteran named Roy, who lived 2 houses down from Karen. He showed up at my ranch one morning with a duffel bag. "Thought you might want to see what I've been collecting," he said with a half smile. Inside, hard drives. Turns out Roy had installed security cameras around his property after Karen's friends vandalized his fence. What those cameras captured was gold. HOA board members discussing fake violations at wine night. Karen laughing about using HOA money for a spa retreat. One video even showed her throwing eggs at a member's house who voted against her. But the kicker? A phone video where Karen brags, "That judge guy, he won't do squat." These types always cave when you bring attention on them. I run this place. That clip alone? Worth more than any affidavit. The court issued a new set of subpoenas that very same day. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors, reporters, even people from other states who had followed the case online. They wanted to see how this small-town HOA nightmare ended. The judge presiding was known for being no-nonsense, and she wasn't amused by Karen's antics. Karen came in wearing a pale pink suit, big sunglasses, and a neck brace she'd never worn before. I sat quietly behind the prosecution team, just watching. The moment Karen saw me, her expression twisted. She was hoping I wouldn't show up. She took the stand early, and her lawyer wasted no time. "Your Honor, my client is a victim of character assassination. She was only trying to uphold community values." The judge raised an eyebrow. By accessing funds, illegally forging documents, and retaliating against non-members? Karen's lawyer turned red. That's pending review. But the jury wasn't buying it, especially not after they watched the video of Karen egging Roy's house. The courtroom gasped. One juror literally shook her head in disbelief. Karen's expression? Stone cold. The neck brace started to look like a prop. Just when the prosecution seemed to be making its final argument, they brought in a surprise witness, Karen's former bookkeeper. She was a soft-spoken woman named Anita. Nervous at first, but once she got going, her testimony blew the roof off. I was instructed to funnel funds marked as trail maintenance into Karen's second checking account. The prosecutor leaned in. "Did she ever threaten you if you didn't comply?" Anita swallowed. She said if I didn't, she'd make sure my son never got into the community school. That drew audible gasps from the gallery. "And did you comply?" Tears in her eyes, Anita nodded. "Yes, I did. I was scared." Then came the clincher, copies of handwritten instructions from Karen, signed and dated. The jury didn't even look confused anymore. They looked furious. Even Karen's lawyer seemed rattled. You could feel it. The tide had turned. 3 days into the trial, another twist landed like a grenade. The prosecution dropped a bombshell discovery. Karen had been secretly using HOA funds to purchase land outside of the community under a shell LLC. Why? So she could build a luxury Airbnb complex that the HOA would be forced to maintain. This is criminal. It's not just fraud, It's theft with long-term intent, the prosecutor told the jury. The court pulled the LLC's incorporation papers. The registered agent? Karen's sister-in-law. The name of the development? Karen Ridge Estates. At that point, one juror actually laughed out loud. The judge slammed her gavel for order, but everyone in the courtroom could see the truth. Karen wasn't just a nuisance. She was a con artist with a vision, and she used fear, fines, and fake rules to build her empire. Now, that empire was crumbling in public. By now, the prosecution barely had to push. But then they introduced Michael Reeds, the HOA vice president, the one Karen had always claimed knew nothing. Michael walked in looking like he hadn't slept in days. His tie was crooked, his face pale. The judge asked, "You've agreed to testify under oath?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said quietly. "I have something I need to say." Turns out, Michael had been documenting Karen's activity for months. She told me to approve everything without looking. She'd say, "Sign it or I'll make your life hell." He turned to the jury. She fined my mother, my own mother, for having a bird feeder. People gasped again. She threatened to evict her if I didn't comply. I did what she said, and I hate myself for it. The prosecution handed over screenshots, text logs, even voice memos Karen left him at 2 a.m. Delete that complaint. Or I'll send your mom another violation. It was overkill, but it cemented the jury's view. Karen didn't just break the law, she weaponized it. After 2 full weeks of testimony, the case was handed to the jury. But while they deliberated, Karen made one last desperate move. From inside her hotel, she went live on social media, a rambling 17-minute stream titled, "The Truth About the Federal Judge Targeting Me." In it, she claimed the trial was fake, the judge, me, had a personal vendetta, and that the jury had been bought off by outsiders. She even named jurors a direct violation of court conduct. When the judge got wind of it, she ordered Karen into custody immediately for contempt of court. Karen was led out of the courtroom in cuffs the next morning. The jury hadn't even returned yet. But that move, it sealed her fate. Because if there was one thing the judge hated more than fraud, it was someone who disrespected her courtroom. The jury came back in less than 4 hours. I was sitting quietly in the gallery, expression unreadable. Karen sat across the aisle in her prison orange jumpsuit, the reality of her situation finally etched across her face. The foreman stood. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all 19 counts. Wire fraud, criminal misrepresentation, conspiracy to commit extortion, tampering with evidence. The courtroom was silent for a beat, then murmurs, some gasps, and from the back row, a few neighbors quietly clapping. Karen's lawyer requested leniency, citing emotional stress and unintentional consequences. But the judge didn't blink. She abused a position of trust. She created a hostile, unlawful government within a peaceful neighborhood. Then came the sentence, 8 years federal time and restitution of every cent she extorted, plus fines. Karen was escorted out in cuffs. She didn't even glance at me. But as she passed the press line, she whispered to one reporter, "This isn't over." The verdict didn't just close a chapter, it opened a floodgate. In the weeks after Karen's conviction, dozens of neighbors began coming forward. Some admitted they'd paid bribes to have violations disappear. Others confessed to being afraid to park in their own driveways or plant flowers in front of their homes. "She fined me for hanging a wind chime," said one elderly woman. "She told me my daughter's wheelchair ramp wasn't aesthetically approved," another man said, shaking with emotion. The state's housing authority sent in investigators to collect stories, and by the end of the month, Karen's HOA board was declared permanently dissolved. But that wasn't all. A community vote was held, and the neighborhood moved to file for official HOA immunity status, protecting all properties from any future mandatory association attempts. The people had had enough. And now, they were taking their power back. It started as a rumor, then someone posted screenshots on a local Facebook group. Karen was writing letters from prison, dozens of them, to her friends, to news outlets. even to HOA sympathizers in other counties. She called herself a political prisoner, claimed I was part of a deep legal conspiracy, and begged others to rise up and take back what HOAs stand for. Most laughed it off, but one letter caught attention. In it, she wrote, "There are others, other HOAs, other people like me. I was just the beginning." Creepy? Yes, but it also led to something more valuable than anyone expected, an FBI tip, because hidden in those letters were names, locations, and emails of at least 3 other HOA boards Karen had been secretly advising. And guess what? 2 of them had nearly identical fraud patterns. Karen might have gone down, but she wasn't working alone. It was a foggy morning when they knocked. 2 agents, clean suits, clear badges. "Judge Nolan? We need to talk." They weren't there for me. They were there because of Karen's letters. Apparently, she'd mentioned my name over a dozen times, called me the problem, the ringleader of opposition, and a threat to HOA authority across the country. I asked the agents if they were investigating a network. The taller one nodded. She's part of something bigger. Her actions here may be the tip of an organized HOA racket. Turns out, Karen had been in contact with other presidents of unofficial HOA boards in at least 4 states. All had filed similar documents. All were extracting money from non-members using threats and fake citations. The FBI wanted my help, as a legal advisor, not just a judge, because I knew their playbook now, every step of it. And if Karen's little empire had been just Chapter 1, the next parts were going to be nationwide. Just when I thought I'd seen the last of it, a manila envelope appeared on my porch. No return address, no postage, just my name, Judge Nolan. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typed in bold, "The HOA doesn't die with Karen. You'll regret what you did." No signature, but there was a flash drive taped to the back of the page. Against better judgment, I scanned it in a secure system. What I found wasn't video, it was a list. Names, addresses, dates. It looked like a target list. My name was first. Below that, several of the neighbors who testified, the judge, even one of the jurors. I immediately called the FBI. They picked it up within hours and launched a full security audit. One thing was clear, this wasn't over. Someone or some group wanted revenge. Karen might have started the war, but it looked like the battle was just beginning. Just when we thought Karen was silenced for good, she made a legal move no one expected. She filed an appeal. From prison. Her new lawyer argued that media influence, including my mere presence in the courtroom, had unfairly swayed the jury, even though I had recused myself from the case entirely. It was a long shot, but it forced a hearing. The courtroom wasn't as packed this time, but the energy was thick. Karen, in her jumpsuit, looked thinner, but the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. She smirked as the new lawyer rambled about judicial bias and personal vendettas. The judge overseeing the appeal was sharp. After reviewing the original trial records, he raised a brow. "Miss Karen, in your own video, you stated that you run this place and that the judge would cave. Care to explain?" Karen hesitated. That was taken out of context. The judge nodded, unimpressed. Appeal denied. Karen slumped in her seat. She knew. That was her last card, and it just got burned. As she was escorted out again, she looked directly at me. But I didn't flinch. I didn't need to, because justice had already done its job. Months passed. The news crews stopped calling. The community rebuilt. The fear that had once blanketed Hidden Ridge was finally lifting. Neighbors began planting gardens again. Barbecues returned. People smiled at one another on walks. Me? I finally got to spend quiet evenings on my ranch, sipping black coffee while the sun set over the hills. Peace. Real peace. But I never let my guard down. Because I knew better now, Karen was just one chapter in a much bigger book. And while she was behind bars, her shadow still lingered in the form of copycat HOAs, rogue community boards, and other self-appointed tyrants trying to exploit power without permission. So I kept the files. I kept the recordings. And I stayed ready. Because when injustice tries to wear a polite smile and hold a clipboard, it's going to find out real quick I don't back down. If you found this story wild, satisfying, or downright unbelievable, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got more real stories, more crazy HOA drama, and more underdogs taking justice into their own hands. And remember, when someone tries to tell you what to do on your own land, know your rights, because the next story might be yours.